Anyone can make an error, but that error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. Hello there, welcome back to the channel. I am Grand Moff Tony. Now, I have been two very distinct, different kinds of collectors in my time. There is the adult, mature, sensible, in it for the fun collector that you see here today, and then there is the collector I was before, back in sort of my late teens, early 20s, who did things a little differently. Now, a while back, I did a video on my top 5 healthy collecting habits, because that's something that I like to have a focus on my channel, is healthy collecting habits. It's doing things in order to keep this hobby fun, and as long as it's fun, that's how long we'll stay in it for. So it makes sense to have different behaviors and rules that you follow, even if they're just like guidelines that keep this hobby fun, that keep you doing the right thing as a collector and not falling into the traps of being a completionist or blowing your rent money on action figures. You know, that's how this hobby can become problematic. And while I was thinking about that, I realized that a lot of the mistakes that me made back in the day kind of inform the decisions that I make as a collector today. And I kind of touched on that idea at the end of that previous video, but I would like to expand it. I want to sit here, have a proper conversation about this. I'm going to tell you the story of me as a Transformers collector back in the day, and how the mistakes and decisions that me made informed the person I would become as a Star Wars collector today. So let's kick things off. Believe it or not, there was a time in my life where Star Wars was not front and center of mind all the time. That big 10-year time period is where this story takes place. And it sort of begins in 2008 when I bought my very, very first Transformer, which was a Voyager class Blackout from the Transformers 2007 movie. And that really kind of kicked things off, my first real venture into collecting toys. Now, this started off innocently enough. I was just collecting the characters from the films. I liked looking at the toys. I liked playing with the toys, shifting them from one form to the other. Like, nothing too out of the ordinary. You know, I was sort of 17, 18 at the time. I'd just finished getting out of school. I was working. I had my own money for the first time in my life. And now I have admitted in the past on the channel that I do have a rather addictive personality. And I've had issues with various different forms of spending addictions over my time. So when collecting the characters from the movie turned into collecting figures of characters that weren't in the movie, but they were produced in the same style, I didn't really think anything of it. It's the next phase of collecting. Let's collect these figures now. And then, you know, time goes on and another film comes out and you start buying toys from that film too. It kind of went on and on to the point where around sort of 2013 is when I started to notice I had changed my behavior around collecting toys. I noticed that when I went out, I didn't go looking for the movie Transformers figures anymore. I just went looking for the Transformers section, and I came home with everything that I didn't have from that section. Lots more of them, and not always really caring which one I was buying, as long as I was adding another one to my collection. This is around the sort of time that I started to make my first big mistake. I had no focus, no collecting focus whatsoever. My collecting focus was Transformers. That was it. I was buying Transformers. That to me was focus enough, but it's not, because there are so many different kinds of Transformer. There are so many different lines within that collection. I bought all of them. Every time I found a new Transformer that I didn't have, I bought it. It didn't matter who it was. It didn't matter what generation it was from. This is around the time that I made my second mistake. I did not respect my space, and when the space was gone, I kept buying more anyway. I kept finding places to stash them, places to put them. Now, I will say that I dodged a very, very common collecting mistake, which is collecting backwards. I didn't fall into that trap, but I did fall into the trap of everything new that came out, I had to have it. It didn't matter who it was, what it was, I had to have it if it was a Transformer. I bought a bunch of crap that I didn't need. Like, Transformers crap. It just kind of took over my whole life. I was buying every size, every scale, every line, characters I liked, characters I didn't like. I'm sitting there spending my hard-earned money on characters that I don't like. I'm not the biggest Bumblebee fan, but I spent a lot of money on, I think, at least 8 or 9 different Bumblebee figures. Why? Because you've got to have a Bumblebee, I suppose. And I was definitely collecting outside of my own means. Like, there were definitely things I was missing out on because I was spending the money on the Transformers. I think at the height of my collecting days with Transformers, I had somewhere in the range of about 300. I had maybe 12 of them on display, I think. So you're already starting to see the problem. Like, I'm still living at home, I've got 300 Transformers action figures, most of which I can't see because they're not on display, and I just keep buying more. I just keep buying more. I have to have more. You could make some weird twisted argument at this point that at this point in my collecting career, like that point right there, I was still fine. I wasn't in any way a healthy collector, but I was fine. I still sort of had my focus, if you like. The Transformers figures was my focus. But it didn't stay that way. Soon, my Transformers collection started to bleed out into other things. Now, of course, I didn't have space for another full-scale collection, so my resolution to that was just to buy whatever I wanted whenever I wanted it. People would come to my house and they would see my room and they would see that I had 2 or 3 pieces from 1,000 different collections. I had Alien vs. Predator figures. I had an Alien and a Predator. They stood on my shelf. That was that. I had cars. I had a Mercedes SLS AMG that I wanted. I signed up for magazine subscriptions. I had a collection of over 150 little 3 3/4 inch DC figures. Why? I don't know. They weren't even action figures. They were statues. They were little die-cast statues, and there were 150 of them, and I had them all, and I don't know why. But I wanted them, so I bought them. Dragon statues. I suddenly decided that dragon statues were my thing, and I started buying dragon statues. Everywhere I found a dragon statue, I would come home with one. Horror figures. Horror props. No idea why I bought those, but I did. Minions. Bebop and Rocksteady for some reason from those live-action Turtles movies. The amphibious cars from Top Gear. I had model kits of them, and I have no idea why, and it just led to the messiest display you've ever seen in your life. Just 1,000 different franchises, 1 or 2 different pieces just slapped together on a shelf, and that was my pride and joy. My collection was just this mass of stuff. Case in point, here is a picture of what I brought home from my first ever Comic-Con. I'll show it up on the screen for you. Try and see how many different franchises are in that picture. How many different scales of action figure. What is all this nonsense? That, I think, is when I was at my absolute worst. Like, it didn't matter what it was, whether I had space for it. I just bought it. I just bought it. And I still, all these years later, looking back on it, I still don't know why. I still don't know why I bought any of it. It just spiraled out of control. I had no control whatsoever. I had no focus. I had no reality. It was just buying stuff. And I wanted to share these different pictures of varying different qualities of my different areas of my collection back then, for one very important reason. I'm going to come back to it in a minute. Now, in the time that I was living in Bristol, something else important happened. I fell out with Transformers, and I fell out hard, like really hard. I don't remember exactly what year it was. It was the year that Transformers The Last Knight came out, and that movie was the end. That film was the end of my relationship with the Transformers franchise. Something about it just turned me off, and it was night and day. It was done. Like, no more Transformers. And so I did something I never thought I was going to do. I sold off my Transformers collection piece by piece by piece. And I wasn't even looking to make any money off of it because I was selling these figures at the price that I had bought them for. So I sold off the whole collection and I used the money from that collection to buy my wife's engagement ring. So if I ever want to see my Transformers collection, I just have to have her flash me her hand and, oh, there they are. I sold them. I sold them all. Partly because I didn't like the movie, but mostly because I felt my life moving in a new direction. So that was all in like early to mid 2018. And as most of you know, I moved to the States at the end of that year, which meant when I returned home, I started to look at what was I going to take with me. But I found myself stood in my room with 2 empty suitcases, looking at all this stuff that I had amassed over the last 10 years of my life, and realizing that I couldn't take it all with me, and I didn't want to. I started to find it easier and easier to just go, donate, sell, donate, sell. To the point that when I left, there was hardly anything left in my room except the really big stuff that I couldn't shift, and nothing of value had been lost. I was terrified going back home that I was going to be rediscovering these collections that I had left behind over a year ago, and that I was going to be hit with this wave of nostalgia and I would be unable to part with it. But instead, what I was hit by was multiple instances of picking things up and going, why do I have this? Why have I got this bust of the Sandman from Spider-Man 3? Why have I got a Jamie Lannister letter opener? Why do I have 150 little die-cast miniature statues of DC characters when I haven't picked up a DC comic book in years? And I suddenly started to realize that I was moving on, like my life was changing, I was moving on with my life, and there wasn't space for this side of me anymore. Like, this side of me had to go. And so it did. The entire swaths of my collection gone overnight. And like I said, nothing of value was lost. Like, nothing that meant anything to me was lost. I started to realize that this dusty old museum that I had turned my room into was just a reflection of the stuff that I was clinging onto for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And I knew there was no reason because as soon as there was a reason to move on and leave it all behind, I did. I didn't find myself fighting with it. I just found myself chucking these things into a toy box and sending them off to my nana to put down in the play area where she was living. Let some other kids play with it. Do I need this one Pacific Rim knife head figure that I bought for absolutely no reason at all without even having seen the movie? Absolutely not. Get rid of it. Years and years of my life, and most of it found itself pushed into one of 2 piles, the donate pile or the bin pile. And this is where I'm going to do the big revelation here, right? The thing that you probably noticed looking at all those pictures. Where are my Transformers? Where are they? There's a couple of them here and there. You can see the Combiner class Devastator, or at least the Scavenger that came with it. You can see the little components of Devastator on my shelf. You might have seen a Transformer here and there, but I have almost no pictures of that collection. The collection I spent near enough 10 years of my life building. I have no pictures. It's just gone. It's a massive chunk of my life and I have nothing to show for it because it didn't really mean anything to me. It really didn't. I have pictures of all the other nonsense that I bought at the time. I even have pictures of my incredibly cluttered and messed up displays. But the collection that started it all, the one that was my main focus for 10 years, just doesn't exist anywhere. That collection was such a massive part of my life. I wasn't people's Star Wars guy back then. I was people's Transformers guy. I was the guy that you went to go and see the new Transformers movie with. And I have nothing to show for it. It's all gone. No pictures. I haven't really held on to any of it. Like, I've got one Grimlock figure that my best friend gave me that I've kept for personal reasons, and that's pretty much it. So, what did I learn from this? Because obviously I was pretty hesitant starting a new collection back when the Black Series first came out. What did I learn? Like, what were the 5 big rules that I took away from being that version of myself and trying to be a better collector now? The big rule number 1 is focus. It's focus. My focus is not just Star Wars, because that is too broad. My focus is Star Wars, the Black Series, the 6-inch figures, the vehicles, every now and then the roleplay helmets as well, because they're really, really cool. But the question I always ask myself when I'm going into a new purchase is, does this fit my collection? And if the answer is no, then I leave it there. The second question is 1,000,000% more important than the first question, but it gets asked second, and that's, does it fit the budget? I've told you in the past I've had problems with spending. I overspent on a lot of stuff when I was my old collecting self, and I spent rent, I spent phone bill money, I spent food money, I spent so much of this stuff on this garbage. Because at that point, it wasn't even my collection anymore. I was just buying stuff to buy stuff. So the second thing I learned was there has to be a budget. There has to be a line in the sand where you say, I have spent enough this month. Nothing now until next month. Thirdly, do I want it? Like, do I like it? Do I even like the thing that's in front of me that I'm thinking about buying? Do I like the character? Do I like the format? Do I like the art style? Do I like the figure itself? Does it make me feel like it's something that I'm gonna like? If I don't like it, I don't buy it. Easy example of that is carbonized figures. Don't like them, don't buy them. And that's where I show that I'm still not perfect, because I have bought 2 credit collection figures and I've regretted buying both. But that's because I ignored item number 3. Are these items? Are they things I learned? Are they rules? Are they questions I ask myself? I don't know. I keep shifting between each one. But number 4, do I need it now? Now this is where a little bit of industry knowledge goes a long way. This is where observing and understanding collecting as a hobby goes a long way, because this is where you start to realize, oh, this is an exclusive. It's only going to be here. It might come back in a few years, but it will not be this price. Oh, this is a high demand character. This one is going to be hard to get. You might want to pre-order this one to make sure you get it. The question, do I need it now or can I wait? Can I come back and get it later? I loved Andor. I thought Andor was fantastic. I wanted to have the show represented, but I didn't rush out and buy every single one of them. I didn't need them right now. Flip side, Bad Batch Season 2, should have bought them the moment I saw them. And question, thing I learned, item number 5. Will this bring me joy? Like, will it make me happy? Because believe it or not, that's what this hobby is about. This hobby is about happiness. It's about bringing joy to ourselves. It's about remembering something, recapturing something, experiencing something again, experiencing being a child again, and playing with an action figure, and then seeing that action figure on your shelf and being like, that is an updated Black Series version of the little 3 3/4 inch mainline figure that I played with when I was 9. All of these things are important, but I feel like number 5 is the core of why we do this. Like I've said this in the past, I don't collect these things so that I can one day sell them and turn a massive profit. This collection makes me happy. Going out and finding figures that I'm looking for make me happy. This is a collection that we've built together, and that makes me happy. It makes me so much happier than that great big dusty old room full of nonsense. Just stuff that I bought on a whim for no purpose. You've got to have a focus. You've got to have a budget. You've got to want it. You've got to decide whether you need it now or whether you can wait, and you have to find joy in it. Those are the 5 most important things that I learned from being that terrible shell of myself that I used to be. So there you have it. That was what I learned from being a terrible Transformers collector in my teenage years, and how it has informed me as an adult Star Wars collector today. So let me pass this subject off to you guys. I want to hear from you. I want to hear about collecting mistakes maybe that you made back in the early days, and how you have grown from those mistakes. That would be absolutely fascinating. So let me know. I'll get back to each and every one of you. Next week, The Acolyte is ending, so we will be talking about my top 5 picks books for characters from that series that I would love to see come to the Black Series. So far they're doing a good job, but obviously there are some really, really big ones that were left out, so we're going to talk about those. And we will be talking about the series itself in a typical me and my missus sit down and chat Star Wars for half an hour, but we will need some time to work through that because we have a lot to say on this one. We'll try and get it done before the end of the month so we can capitalize on that good old search algorithm. In the meantime, however, I've been Grand Moff Tony. Those were some of my collecting mistakes in the past and how they have formed the me you see today. You may subscribe when ready.